Hello everyone, and welcome to the Pancake Parlay, episode 93. I'm your host, The Don, and I'm here with Chatters. How are you today?
I'm good, Don. How are you?
I'm good. Obviously, the Pancake Parlay podcast, we talk about movies, TV shows, video games, comics, and general pop culture news. So remember, like, share, and subscribe, because it really helps us a lot. And let's just jump in to our first topic, which is good old grumpy Harrison Ford. Generally doesn't really like to play ball with a lot of I guess corporations here and there. He pretty much is an old grumpy old man in real life, as well as pretty much all the things he plays these days. Um, and there was a really funny interview with him recently about basically the latest Star Wars film and people deconstructing it. But yeah, I'll let you talk about more about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, pretty much like during an interview, I think it must have been on either it was with like Jimmy Kimmel or it was like I'm pretty sure it
The
was
other
one of
Jimmy.
those. Yeah, one of those like kind of late night. And essentially, he was very shocked that Harrison Ford could come back in Star Wars because I think very much like in episode 7 he kind of signed himself off to be like, hey, I'm not returning for one of these. I want to do my dog movies. What's the movies here? I think it's called like Call of the Wild or something like
Something like
that.
that. It's
Yeah,
him with a dog in a boat, as far as I know.
yeah. Which is really funny because I'm pretty sure there's like another very similar to that that's also coming out. So it's very much it's one of those things where like I feel kind of like Armageddon and Deep Impact, right? Or Volcano and Dante's Peak. Like it's those kind of like movies that are made around about the same time. It's probably like the same script, but it's like obviously passed over two different companies, whatever. But yeah, like Harrison Ford was just surprised. He's just like, wait, how can Harrison Ford come back? And like, yeah, to quote him, he says, "When JJ asked me to do it, I said, 'Are you kidding? I'm dead,'" which is absolutely hilarious. Because yeah, obviously he doesn't know what's going on, and like you said, he said, well, JJ said, yeah, sort of dead. You can do this, and as I said, he's like, yeah, if JJ asked you to do something, you'd probably do it too. He's a very persuasive guy. So yeah, like clearly he doesn't really know what the hell is going on with Star Wars. It's like not really something he is invested in or cares about, like compared to someone like Luke Skywalker, right?
Yeah,
Uh, you
where
know,
basically it's not part of his 100% of his kind of career, and he's obviously stated he wanted to die in Star Wars, or like he wanted to be killed off, which he did. So I
yeah,
feel like
within like the first episode, right?
yeah, the first episode 7. So he's probably just like, yeah, just leave me alone. He's got better things to do, or he just doesn't want to do it. I feel like it's like he's like one of those actors where he's like, I was part of this thing, and now I don't really care for it type, and now but everyone loves it.
Well,
So
I mean, out of like the main trio from the original movies, he was the only one who kind of had a proper career post Star Wars, like in kind of like the big screen. This isn't to say anything against Mark Hamill or I'm forgetting her
Carrie
name
Fisher.
now, Carrie Fisher either. Like they obviously had their roles. I mean, Mark Hamill obviously was successful as a voice actor, right? But like they never really made it really big on the big screen post Star Wars as much as like so you see Harrison Ford, right? And so subsequently, I think that's obviously going to be a problem with it. And so he's kind of like separated himself with all that um, since going on and doing other movies, and he's done a ton.
Yeah,
Um, so it makes sense,
yeah.
but it's just really funny. It's very funny that like he kind of doesn't give a shit to the point that like he's surprised that people can come back as ghosts in
That
Star
or I think
Wars.
he's maybe playing it up for the audience a little bit,
Nah,
but
I don't
still.
think so. I don't think so. I think he's being very, very honest about his response. Because this is, as I just quickly looked it up, it was actually with the interview with USA Today. So this is a newspaper. There's no audience to,
Yeah,
ham it up
there's no
with.
audience to ham it up in like, funny Harrison Ford.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's just hilarious, and it just shows where the state of Star Wars is at the moment. And we'll just have to.
Yeah, there actually has been rumors,
Mm,
leaked on like YouTube, and who knows if they're true or not. But they talk about how like Filoni and Jon Favreau are basically staying away from Kathleen Kennedy and making sure she doesn't touch any of the Mandalorian stuff. I don't know if that's true or not. But it'd be very interesting if that was true, and how things would play out if that was true, and then they're probably just looking for someone to kind of replace her almost.
Yeah, I mean, look, it has to essentially. There's going to be a point in time where Kathleen Kennedy is going to be stepping away from Lucasfilm. She's going to be bowing out from any responsibilities going forward, and it's not her being fired; it's her stepping away so she can spend more time with family. Right? It's going to be some kind of bullshit excuse like that, where realistically, no, she was fired, and the company gave her the option of either you know, leaving, with on good terms publicly and professionally, or leaving and I don't know, not getting like a severance package, which will be in like the millions, obviously.
Yes, the person who drove Star Wars down.
Yeah, exactly. But speaking of franchises, which hopefully won't be driven down because it actually can't get any lower for this particular franchise, Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
So recently, James Gunn, I think on Instagram, and like you can obviously answer give out questions and to people who offer them. And one of the questions asked about whether or not he did any research into doing his scripts for movies, especially when it came to comics. And in the reply, he said in one case, well, before writing Suicide Squad, I reread every single Suicide Squad comic, and that's a lot of comics.
Yeah, especially
I'm not.
but that's the thing, especially the new interpretations, because I feel like after the New 52 reboot of Suicide Squad, I think it's just basically been a mainstay. Because before that, it was just really the 80s run of Suicide Squad, and then like
Mhm.
one shots like here and there, and then it was basically the New 52 version.
Mhm.
So yeah, but either way, it just kind of shows that he's done his research and he knows, I guess, the tone of Suicide
Well,
Squad, and
yeah,
like
I hope it's true. I hope that this isn't like him just
I
trying
think he
to.
legit is, because I think he is actually a
Yeah.
legit nerdy guy. Like he likes nerdy
Mm.
stuff. He worked on a few other games. Like he worked on like Lollipop Chainsaw, a City 51 game. He did the script for that. Um,
Well, it's not me questioning his
Nerd
gamer
credentials.
cred, nerd cred, but more like, well, did he really read every single comic in preparation for this? And the thing is, like, it might be the case just because a lot of the characters that he's picked for his run for Suicide Squad, which is just called the Suicide Squad rather than a Suicide Squad 2 or something like that. Which I hope, like, this is the thing, like, he does a good ensemble movie, and I hope that the way that this new movie will go, it will just kind of deal with this group of characters, and it'll be far more grounded and no weird dancing witches and things like that. It'll have a very tight story. A lot of the people who from the previous movies are returning in some respect, right? Like
Yeah,
Margot Robbie.
yeah. There was a leak of Margot Robbie with Harley Quinn in a different outfit. It looks like she has some sort of staff
Yeah,
as
like some.
well.
Yeah, I saw that too. Like it was like a shot from like a scene, and it's got like Polka Dot Man. It's got
Yeah, there's
Idris
people walking down
Elba
the
in
street
it.
and
Yeah,
everything. Yeah, and it's like,
yeah.
they've got like these big jackets. So I feel like, obviously he's like playing it up, and like that's why I
I
have
think that's
general
what.
confidence of it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have more confidence in it than the last guy who did Suicide Squad movie. I just hope that like it'll, I don't know, be good because look, that's the thing. Like the state of like DC and DC movies at the moment are kind of like up in the air, and you're not kind of too sure like how it's gonna all plan out to be. Speaking of which, like Ben Affleck said in an interview with New York Times that like why he left the DC extended universe. And he basically said that like his trouble with like alcohol and his divorce from Jennifer Garner, on top of all the negative responses to Justice League, basically prompted him to like kind of leave the role of Bruce Wayne and Batman in the DCU, which I find really sad because obviously like um, look, Justice League wasn't a good movie. Like it was like an average movie at best. Maybe I'm much more like praiseful for it, like going because we did a review on it, like when it came out, but like it definitely wasn't like the best thing that like DC has put out. Like I think followed Justice League was like Wonder Woman, right? And Wonder Woman was really good.
And
So
then
like
even
they're
then after
obviously
that it was like Aquaman, and then after that it
yeah
was Shazam. So it's just like, okay then, like, and then after that
yeah
was Joker.
yeah. So like yeah,
And now,
like
and now
so
it's
you
Birds
know
of
the
Prey, so it's kind of comes full circle.
yeah
But
yeah you
still,
know like yeah. So it's like all the legacy. This is the problem. I think like I think Margot Robbie actually had like a big say in regards to how the Birds of Prey movie was going to be. And I think he was the one who decided that, oh, it's going to be a Birds of Prey movie rather than a Gotham City Sirens movie. And there was a lot, we talked last week about how like when you're trying to target a demographic within the four quadrants, older women, older men, younger men, and you try and like go outside of your like typical
like your target
target
demographic,
audience.
yeah.
Yeah, target audience. You got to make sure that the people who would watch your movie are still coming to the movie and watching it. And from my understanding, it is the case with Birds of Prey. But the thing is, like, there's a lot of like outlets like comicbook.com and CBR who are like running defense for it and being like, oh no, like it's a good movie, it hasn't bombed. Stop saying it's bombing, and it's just hilarious because it is clearly it's doing bad. Like, and yeah, like let it be the mistake it's supposed to be, right? Like I kind of always see like film and like successes is kind of like evolution, right? Like it's survival of the fittest. The things that survive in an ecosystem at a given time will survive based on whether or not it has things people or the environment is looking for. If people want to see action movies, oh sorry, like at the moment it's kind of like a renaissance of superhero films, right? So people are kind of watching superhero films, so you got to make it like almost like very, very closely to what the adapted comic is now, other because people are much more savvy with the source material than let's say like a decade or two ago. Sorry, more than a decade or so ago.
I honestly think
The
it's
early two
I think it's
thousands.
honestly like a decade, because like even when the first Captain America came out, or kind of like Thor, there really, I don't think there were many people who knew what was kind of going on, and then like all the post
Sure,
credit
but if
scenes were
you
very like, I do remember even after the first Avengers, there were still people like walking out at the post kind of credit scene. So I think there was a lot of people who weren't in the know.
yeah,
Um,
but this was like that's early Marvel, right? But the thing is, like all those characters are pretty faithful to their adaptation. But if you compare it to like some of the older movies that were comic book adaptations, like they're kind of more designed to be like almost like their own universe almost, right? Rather than something that's more holistic that is able to like kind of grow collectively with certain other films. That what the Marvel Cinematic Universe eventually ended up doing, because obviously back then it was not really something that people thought could happen. But this is the thing with something like DC going forward, like we don't know what's going to be the case or how things are going to look in terms of Batman, because another piece of news that I'll mention is that they did like they showed like test shots of the bat suit. So they had Robert Pattinson in like in a red light, and it's like kind of showing off like the suit, and it kind of has like this kind of like from the Batman Arkham game, like so it's kind of like an armored look. The bat symbol is like from what I understand, like the I don't know if it's confirmed, but it said that like the bits inside the bat symbol is like the melted parts of the gun that killed Batman's parents, and like I'm kind of like, that's a bit edgy. Like, I don't know, like
we
if
need an
that's
edgy
true.
Batman, guys.
Yeah, again, again. Well, I don't know. The thing is, the suit looks really cool because it kind of reminds me of like Arkham games. I know a lot of people are kind of like, oh no, it looks too much like armor. It doesn't look practical. I don't know. Like,
But even then, but even then,
yeah,
my real thing is like, yeah, I guess the top part kind of looks like the body part looks like armor, but the top
the
part
top
really
part,
much looks like some sort of like leather like
leather, yeah,
thing, because it
leather,
has
yeah,
like these cross stitches around the
yeah.
nose. So it's kind of like
Well,
this like
here's the
older
thing.
but new. So that's why I got a feeling that like it's gonna be there's like things where they show off this one bat suit, but there's probably gonna be multiple bat suits since this is an origin film.
Well,
It's kind of
here's the
part for
thing.
the course for it.
here's the thing. I don't think there'll be multiple Batsuits. I think this is just a test shoot for what they want Batman to kind of look like, right? Like, there was a lot of comparison to, I think, Daredevil. Like the mask looks like the Daredevil mask from the Netflix TV show. But like I think, and people want to see, oh, what do the ears look like? What do this look like? And the thing is, I think ultimately they want to at least kind of have like people excited. And the hottest take I heard was the camera test was supposed to deflect attention from Birds of Prey doing really badly in the cinemas. Like I don't think that's true, but I mean,
I wouldn't be
could
surprised
be.
to be honest with you, because
I don't know.
DC
You're
has
the
done some
marketing
stuff
guy.
like that
I don't know.
before, where where they've just kind of like put something out there just because of like, oh shit, like bad PR. So like I wouldn't be surprised if Warner Brothers they do that. So
Yeah, and this is the thing. I think ultimately, like, it's gonna be we're gonna be getting like a hopefully a very different Batman with Robert Pattinson's Batman. Maybe
well,
hopefully
it's written
I'm
directed by
hoping.
Matt Reeves. So the
Yeah.
guy did all the Planet of the Apes, the recent Planet of the Apes films, and he's a pretty talented director, and especially bringing a story like that and actually doing a reboot that people like, and also fans of kind of like the older Apes movies do like as well. So I
Mm,
wouldn't be surprised if he's more like a Nolan than he is kind of a Zack Snyder, where he probably has some sort
sure.
of vision, or he signed on to do the movie because he has some sort of vision that he wants to have
Hmm.
for Batman. I think that's what they're doing with it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I have a lot of faith that like like the more this is the thing. People obviously I don't know if there has been like any other character, and maybe it's just because like Batman has been a character who uh is so big in people's minds that people kind of have a lot of takes about whenever there's a new Batman or whenever there's a new um Joker, people kind of lose their shit. Like it happened during, back when, the first time when The Dark Knight came out, and we saw our first look at the Joker, and people were like, "Oh, it's gonna be bad. It looks bad." But I remember I was someone who thought it looked pretty cool. Um, and it's the same time it happened with Ben Affleck, where people are like, "Nah, nah, it doesn't look good. Doesn't look good." But then, like, once it came out, it's like he kind of shows, like, hey, he's probably the best iteration of Batman that we've seen live action. So it's one of those things where, like, and it's the same thing with Joaquin Phoenix. People had a lot of issues with how he looks because
Yeah,
he didn't have like the traditional Joker makeup. He didn't have like the purple suit. He didn't have um, a lot of the typical kind of mannerisms per se. But it's like it's all an interpretation. That's what we kind of have in like an extended alternative media.
yeah,
But I
I
don't
feel
see it.
but that's the thing. I feel like DC has that a lot just purely because the characters are just so well known in general pop culture. But on top of that, like there's been so many different iterations of like a Superman and a Batman now, so it's kind of like that's why
I think.
that's why I'm always okay with like Zack Snyder giving me like emo Superman or like killing
Yeah,
Batman, because it's a very much different. We've already
sure.
seen different versions of it. Well, and that's why I think like
Hey,
a lot of
uh,
criticisms for DC stuff, you don't get that for Marvel stuff, because like Thor that you see on the screen, that's the first time you see Thor or Captain America in the
yeah,
big
yeah.
screen. Like
I mean, the closest.
wait 10, 15 years down the line, when at some point they'll probably reboot it, maybe, who knows, or they'll get some sort of semi replacement. That's when people are going to be
Hmm,
like, yeah, comparison, where it's like, yeah, I don't know,
yeah, yeah.
like Steve, what is it, Chris Evans is a better Captain America than the other
Sure, sure.
dude.
I
Like,
mean, they technically have had that. Like, the only character that comes, they have something like that is Spider-Man, right? Because obviously, like we've had the latest iteration of Spider-Man, and he's kind of in the MCU, but we've had the same amount of Spider-Mans as we've had Batmans within the same decade or so, right? Like at least announced, which is like three, I believe. So it's one of those things where, like, yeah, like we'll be able to kind of handle it. It's just going to be going forward. Let's see some more footage before we judge whether it's good or bad. I like what I see, but I can kind of understand because people are like, the suit kind of looks too much like the Arkham suit or whatever, or too armored, which I get because that's what why people the Affleck suit because it looks more like a suit that Batman would wear, which is like it's very like flexible, but it's like still protective. and wouldn't. Whereas, like, he'd wear like a metal suit or an armored suit when he's going up against Superman, like he did in Batman v Superman, for example. But yeah, speaking of Arkham games, within like the past couple of days, there has been like some news about the I guess the new upcoming Batman game that's going to be coming out. People have been saying like, whispering about like there's being like a reboot, or is it a remake? But reportedly, according to Warner Brothers Montreal, the game is a reboot. So it'd be interesting to see how it manifests, because from what we understand is that there is going to be a focus on, or at least an influence of, the Court of Owls. So, the stuff in the Arkham games, like, maybe they don't have it, or, maybe it might not even have the Arkham name. I don't know. I think like Batman Arkham something, like, they can drop the Arkham name, but I think it's just like they need to have a plan of where they're going with the game, so they can have a cool like alliteration. So like, if it's not like Arkham this, maybe it's like Dark this, or like something that they can kind of use repeatedly, and it rolls off the tongue among
Yeah,
fans, and
like
they
it's a
can delineate.
it's like a series, because like you got the Arkham series type of thing, and
Yeah,
I feel
yeah.
and I feel like for marketing purposes, it just you've got like a whole set of things that you can buy. Well, the Arkham trilogy did this, and this whatever did this, so it's like you need to find like a good like wording for it, but also like a good thing, because what I get a feeling that they'll probably do is. Maybe, as you're saying, since it's a kind of origin thing, I feel like this one's gonna be a semi more like I'd say like there was connective tissue aside from like obviously Arkham City to Arkham Knight, because that's pretty obvious, the connecting tissue. But it's like I honestly feel from the get go they're making this big story, and I feel like maybe like in this game in the future, who knows, maybe it'll end on like some sort of cliffhanger. And like I feel like they're prepared, because I think when Arkham Asylum came out, it really was a surprise. Like no one was expecting this game to be good, and really to for example,
I don't know if that. I don't know about that. I think
I don't know. I don't remember hearing about it. Sort of really about it.
Nah, I disagree. I remember when Batman Arkham Asylum came out, people were excited for that game, like because it wasn't a game that was like supposed to be a what is it, like
a tie-in to a movie,
movie tie-in, or something like that. It was just its own game, and it was just like a game that was good based off its own merits. Like I remember when this game was coming out, I was like, "Fuck yeah!" Like all the press and stuff behind it looked cool. So yeah, no, I definitely have to push back against that. I'm pretty sure people were excited about Arkham Asylum. Like whether or not they thought it was going to be as good as it was going to be, I don't know. But I don't think people kind of approached it with like something like, I don't know, like the first Iron Man game. I don't know if you ever played. I don't know if you ever played any
I
of
did
the
hear about
Marvel
it,
Iron Man.
But it's not only that, but it's like also like that game is really pretty much responsible for making like really blowing up Harley Quinn. Because like aside from the animated series,
like the modern Harley Quinn,
the modern Harley Quinn, and probably the main reason why she's in like everything in the New 52, plus like
the way she is,
and now like in movies,
Yeah, I remember seeing like Harley's costume, and I was like, oh, this is very different. Like obviously they went for a more like kind of they went against the whole like kind of traditional tight knit like kind of jester suit that she had, and went for like a more kind of almost like easy to cosplay suit, right? Like in a way, like it's but it still had the same kind of vibe about it. Like she is like a crazy villain, working for the Joker, and yeah, it's like, and obviously like as it grew, the one thing I was pretty disappointed about its jump from the Arkham games to the comics is like they decided to go with making her hair pink and blue. I always kind of found that really random.
Well, I think that's the thing. I think in the game it was like red and purple. That was the thing. But then in the comics, then they started to get the pink and blue thing going.
No, but it wasn't. But it wasn't red and purple. It was red and black, because that's what her color suit was, right? Like it was. She wore like the red and black like tight skin costume. And then obviously it might have like a little bit of white on it, like because it's like of the frills or whatever.
No, but I mean in the Arkham games, if you look at
it was the same there. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was black, dude, from memory.
I just remember it was basically a nurse outfit, if I remember.
Yeah, it was a nurse outfit. It was a nurse outfit, but like it was still like a what was it like it still had the red, black, and white, but it just had more white because it was like a nurse outfit, right?
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm looking at it now. Like yeah, it's black, but like yeah, oh yeah, even here, like yeah, like it's like a light shade of red, but it's still red, right? Like you could call it pink, but then the other side of her hair is black. But then they decided to go with blue in the comics. It just seemed really random. And even like now, when you look at some of the comics, she'll still wear like red and black, but then her hair is still those colors. Even if you watch like the new Harley Quinn series, which is really good. Everybody should watch that because it is actually really good. I think it's going to be finishing like maybe next episode or something like that. But yeah, it is kind of confirmed that this game is going to be a reboot, so that's really interesting. And obviously, like I don't know if you ever played Arkham Origins. I did,
Yes.
and yeah, I liked it. Obviously, it wasn't like as good as like every like the other games, but I think like it's definitely not a bad game. It had like bug issues, not as bad as I had with Arkham Knight though. But
Burn.
I think I really like the story, and I like the setting during Christmas and stuff. I think people were annoyed because like obviously the bugs, and obviously like it ended up being like another story about the Joker, and people were kind of getting sick of that. And I think that's something that we're gonna hopefully move away from going forward with these games, because I think the big villains are going to be the Court of Owls, because we had the Arkham Origins game, and that is technically his origins in the Arkham game, even though it wasn't made by Rocksteady, it was made by Warner Brothers. But I think this gives the opportunity of like Batman to kind of they get to make him as old or as young as he wants to be, and then like they're going to probably give him like a little bit of a history, and then allow for and then he finds out the court has been behind everything this whole time without having to deal with the kind of baggage from the previous game. So there's probably going to be like the Joker's probably still going to be around, but he's going to have like be significantly de-emphasized, and maybe there might be a focus on other characters, because I feel like, especially I think in Arkham City, sorry, not Arkham City, Arkham Knight probably has like the most characters in it, like just because there's some DLC that you can play as Batgirl and
Yeah, I just remember it was just
Nightwing in it.
full of so many characters, but like, yeah,
You don't play as them for long. Like in Arkham
yeah.
City,
I
you
think
play.
if I remember correctly, because I had a lot of it. It was like because I got the collector's edition, which didn't
Hmm,
come with the Batmobile because they screwed us over on that one.
oh
But I
gosh.
remember I remember that controversy. But yeah, basically you get to play Harley Quinn, Red Hood, Nightwing, like you got to play so many different
Oh, yep,
characters, but it was
that's
only
true. You
generally
could.
like I think the missions only really lasted like about an hour, and then that was
Yeah,
kind
they
of
were
like your
pretty
thing.
short, and it's a shame because like I think I really liked like the Harley Quinn, and like cause when she goes into her kind of detective mode, it's like you could see like it's her being insane, kind of, right? Like it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
she
it was
could
like a
see
cool
like
gimmick.
graffiti on the wall. It was like graffiti on the wall that would say like ha 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 and stuff, but it's like only when you used it. So it's like it's almost like when she's like using like every single point of IQ in her brain, she's also going crazy. There was a good kind of like mix up on something that I think a lot of people, it kind of gets annoying in video games where there's detective mode for everything, right? And I think Batman is at least one of the ones that kind of pioneered that, or like Assassin's Creed. I don't know which one
Well,
came out,
Assassin's
but
Creed, yeah, originally had some sort of like, yeah, it had that,
something like
yeah,
that.
it had it like that, but it was very much like yeah, and then I think Batman, I think people just saw the uses of it more in
Mm-hmm.
Batman, and they're just like, yeah, we'll do it this way, like it can reveal
Do it this way,
secrets
yeah.
or like the
Well,
mission.
it was so bad that like because people would just play the game on detective mode that they nerfed it in Arkham City. And I didn't realize that until I played it and I found out about this particular fact, because I think it's like if you get hit, it takes you out of detective mode, and then you're forced to fight in like the normal mode or something like that. There's like some other kind of it's like there's some other stuff like you can only look at certain things without being on detective mode. So I like how they kind of change it, and even in like Arkham Origins, they added like an investigative element where like you use detective mode to like solve crimes and reconstruct like the crime scene, even though it's more or less like, hey, point the camera at this angle and point the camera. It's not anything big, but at least it like used
It
the
did something
function
with
for
it more, different way
more
to do
than
it.
something superficial. Like follow these footprints that you can only look at in detective mode. Like I think I remember like playing a lot of the first game in detective mode because yeah, it's like why wouldn't you? Also, it looked cool anyways because you still have the cape and shit. But yeah, they also revealed like in a Twitter post that I think one of the elevators like had like a Batman symbol, and so a lot of people are kind of speculating like, oh, like is this going to be um the symbol that they're going to use going forward? Is it like a hybrid of the Batman Beyond image, because that's what I see a pretty big similarity to. So is it like a little bit of both, or is it just like it's just a bat symbol? They gotta you gotta mix it up here and there, with what it looks like. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do, especially when you have like it being a fresh palette. You can kind of go and have some interesting stories with other characters other than like oh, it's the Joker again, or it's I don't know, Scarecrow again. Like I don't
Not
know.
only that, but I
Actually,
feel like
wish there was more.
Joker comes with like a preset of like it has to fulfill a certain story. And I do remember like Mark Hamill saying he doesn't really want to reprise the Joker anymore.
But he did anyways.
Yeah, yeah, but I don't know if he's gonna
he
come
went,
back
he went
again.
ahead and did Joker again.
But still, it's like one of those things where it's like I don't know, like at some point, like you're gonna move on to kind of different ways of thinking, especially with Batman. Like you're gonna move away from the villains that it's known for. That's why early rumors of even, for example, the new Batman movie. Obviously it's got Penguin and everything, but there's no Joker in sight, which is probably the best thing for that film.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's the thing. Like, I think the thing is like with this game, it's gonna have the Riddler in, because there's got to be a character who has like these trinkets that he has to follow it up on like in the collectathon manner. So that's obviously going to happen. But when it's on TV or the big screen, it's a little bit different. So it'd be interesting to see what the Riddler is going to be like, from a movie perspective, and will they actually be able to engage with us intellectually as the audience, trying to figure out the puzzle alongside Patterson's Batman. That's what I'm interested in. So yeah, I'm interested in both these, the movie and the game coming out. So we'll have to see how it all goes going forward. Um, Speaking of video games, um, Sonic came out last week,
The
and
Sonic.
yeah, and after a lot of backlash, earlier like last year when they released like the initial trailer or so for it, where we had like this nightmare version of Sonic.
It's the teeth and the eyes.
It's the teeth, the eyes, the head, the legs.
Oh
Also, he did
yeah, I
have
forgot about how
gloves.
weird the legs looked.
Yeah, like yeah, he had it was very long, very which isn't too off brand for Sonic. I think it's just like the ratio was weird, right? Like there's like a way that Sonic looked, and he didn't look like. It looked more like a person. And that's kind of disgusting. You gotta, and also this is the thing. The big mistake that they did with the design is Sonic is supposed to be like a cute character, right? Like, and when you try and make characters look cute, it's always like an eye to head ratio. Big eyes, small head, looks cute. Same thing with babies, right? Like babies have really really big eyes compared to the rest of their head, but as they get older and bigger, like the head gets bigger, but the eyes kind of only grow only a little bit. That's why if you ever look at your cartoons, or if you ever look at Disney movies, like all the characters that look cute have like really big eyes compared to the rest of their faces. Especially in anime, great example. Huge ass eyes, whereas like all the villains and stuff have these really like sharp eyes.
Evil
To make
eyes.
yeah, to try and make him look good, to look evil. Sorry. Whereas Sonic, he just kind of looked like a dude. At least I didn't give him the because Sonic's supposed to have like one eye. I don't know if you ever really noticed it.
Yeah,
It's
or
supposed to be
or
like
basically
yeah,
like the eyes merge. Like
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and it look
I
kind of
think the
it looks
original
basically it's one eye.
Yeah, I think the original creator was like disappointed that the Sonic didn't look like that. Whereas I was like, oh, look, man, like they did a really good job with how he looks. Like I think they fixed the nose and everything. But yeah, it made it $70 million in its debut. in the US, and it's projected to make I think 200 worldwide. Um, and I think even Jim Carrey said that he believes that the first trailer and the backlash and everything led to the subsequent success of the film because they kind of looked at it and they're like, hey, look, to quote him, he said it turned out to be a co-op where everyone was in on the creation. I think everybody felt good about it, and it ultimately, because of the director Jeff Fowler, had no ego involved. He just went, these people grew up with it, and it's important that we get it right. And I think it was just a much better movie because of it. Like, this is the kind of positive attitude that you need to go into movies with. Like, and the thing is, I went and watched Sonic, and it's a pretty good movie. Like, it's probably, I feel like I say this every time I watch a new video game movie, but it's probably the best video game movie that's come out.
It's like
I
we're
think I said that
progressively getting better at it.
yeah, like especially because like again, it's kind of like a renaissance. Because here's the thing, like at the moment, it's like superhero games, but eventually they're going to run out of superheroes to adapt, and then it's going to be video games and video game franchises, right? It's going
And
to
the
be.
anime.
I mean, what? There's going to be a sequel to the Tomb Raider that's coming out. Did you hear about that?
Yeah. You know, like I think we both said it's like, like it's okay,
Yeah,
but it's
no,
like it's not really that special.
it's more bad than good, but yeah, like it's not amazing. And there's a lot more things that they can do with Lara Croft that they didn't. Like for example, they didn't give her the double guns.
And they
They
tease it at
needed
the
to.
end, and that's very much like a mid 2000s like video game movie
Did
thing.
they give
Yeah,
Lara
where
Croft
she's like,
the
I'll
double
buy
gun in
two
the
of them, thanks.
but like I mean in the video game. Because I know in the first game she doesn't
I
until the very end of the game. There's like a sequence where she holds the double guns and blasts them. But does she do it in the second and third game
no, I think
at
they
all?
took him away if I remember correctly.
Really? Oh my god! But that's what I'm saying. It's not even in the first game. That's like classic Lara Croft is
It's
like
just
having
goddamn
those
do
double
it
guns.
already. But yeah, and it's like you know, going back to the Sonic movie, it's like
Mm.
you know we need people like if you're adapting something that people like. I feel like there's obviously some sort of credence that you need to follow, like a strict thing. Like for example, you never saw that with Ryan Johnson. You know, him never backing down with his stuff. But on
Hmm.
top of that, you know, um, like you know, not only that, but he has such a massive ego. Where on Twitter, he's like he doesn't care about anyone aside from himself and what he
Hmm.
delivers.
Sure.
And that's the thing. It's like I strike a balance of if it's a property that people know and love. And if you're adapting something, you have to follow suit of what the fans would like. However, as mentioning like a little bit earlier, if it's something creative, like a little bit new, or like you know, if it's par for the course, like it's justified. I feel like there is a reason for change. Like for example, like you know, most of the time when directors do bold and interesting things, it's not on a property that already exists. Like something like Tarantino, for example, like all his stuff is very bold, very unique, very different. And the way he does it, and he doesn't compromise on his vision at all. Even if it means not getting into China's censorship, because that's what happened once upon a time in Hollywood. He just doesn't care. Like go on him, good good stuff for the artist. But when it comes to you know, for example, if he does 100% have to do the adaptation of Star Trek, that I don't know if he'll ever be doing that.
He's not. He's look. He's probably not.
He's probably not doing it, but if he was, I guarantee you, like he would not compromise on his vision. But if it's a property that people like, you know, maybe you should give what the fans like, and this is what it really all boils down to. It's not even just what fans like; it's just a terrible decision. It's a terrible character design. That's all it
Well,
really was, and
well,
people just wanted something more like the video game.
well, yeah. Look, I honestly think it's a mistake to put on directors who aren't willing to compromise their vision over what the like. You don't want a film that's made by committee, right? And you can argue that maybe Sonic is like a movie that's made by committee. I wouldn't be totally against that because again, it's like definitely a movie that it's a paint by numbers movie. But like, I think it does an excellent job at kind of filling a niche of a wholesome family movie, because this is the thing, like it's like an adventure movie. It's like a comedy. Sonic's really great in it. Like Sonic's like one of the better characters in it. Jim Carrey's excellent in it. I don't really want to spoil it because I want you to watch it. Don, that's how
But
good
I
it
would assume he does a really good because yeah, he plays really good character actors, and he's one of those guys who has like a rubber face, and I feel like yeah, his would be like over the top performance, correct? And it's probably like because
is. Yeah,
I
which
think I
to
think
me,
we were talking about last week. It's like you don't really see Jim Carrey in much anymore, you know?
well, this is the thing. Like, I think the thing is like Jim Carrey's like kind of last few movies. I think this movie. I think the last movie that Jim Carrey might have done like really, really well in might have been Bruce Almighty. That was the last movie that he was in that made like this kind of bonkers money, right? That it's making like other movies, like he did like I don't know that like Penguin movie.
Mr.
He
Popper
did like
Penguins. That was like the
uh,
incredible Burt Wonderstone, which is like very forgettable. I guess how many
uh,
people remember that he was in Kick Ass too, and he played the character to
yeah,
a
but yeah,
T,
but yeah,
but he
yeah, but
wasn't the main
Kick-Ass 2.
character. Yeah,
Yeah, but Kick-Ass 2 didn't do that well.
yeah.
So, like, that's not. I actually didn't even watch it, so I can't tell you if it was good. I was just like, oh, it doesn't look as good, so I won't watch
Well,
it. And
it doesn't have Matthew Vaughn, so yeah, it wasn't that good. So.
okay, right, so there you go. So what you're saying is I was correct in not watching
But
Kick-Ass
still,
2.
as a person who loves Kick Ass, I had to watch it. So.
Yeah, well, yeah, fair enough. And
And
here's
Jim
the
Carrey
thing,
does
like
a good performance. I'd watch it for Jim Carrey. You
well,
know,
but here's the thing, Jim Carrey, like he's a bit of a well, he plays like a bit of a type. He's kind of typecast in a way. But the thing is, like, you have to give him a role that he can kind of take and absorb and make it into the character that he is. And I think Mr. Robotnik, or Eggman, uh, is a character that kind of that role that fits it of a zany scientist character who is kind of over the top, and he kind of plays that like to a T in this film. He's hilarious in it, and a lot of it, it's like I think very much it would have been like they gave him a script and they're like, hey, you say what's on this script, or you can ad lib it and kind of freestyle it if you want. That's up to you, because like there's a really funny interaction between him and I think James Marsden, where like Eggman's trying to so essentially the plot of Sonic is Sonic has to flee his world, and he comes to Earth, and he's kind of like a bit of a loner, and he's sad and stuff, and he accidentally, when he runs a little bit too far, sets off like a very large energy burst that gets the attention of the government, who then subsequently hire Robotnik to figure out what caused this big blast of energy that led to like a blackout. And and that's kind of where the movie sets off. And he goes to approach James Marsden um, because he's someone he's been spying on, and that kind of leads to the interaction that you see in the trailers where he says meow and subsequently gets shot. Now, look, a lot of the plot contrivances is like, hey, he's really fast, shouldn't he be able to move out of the way of the bullet? Yeah, like the movie isn't supposed to be like an Oscar contender, right? It's the main demographic it's trying to hit on it's trying to hit on people who children, and people who kind of grew up watching or playing the Sonic video game, right? These are the people that are the main demographic of the movie. But I think it does an excellent job at, kind of like The Simpsons did, where it's like it was something that's targeted to children, but then it would have these adult jokes in it. Whereas if you contrast that with something like Family Guy, which is supposed to be like a adult-oriented TV show because it obviously makes a lot of jokes about sex and adult themed content, right? So that's kind of the difference. Whereas Simpsons tries to do like a little bit of like both, where it gives you like a lot of these references and things that kids won't understand, but you would if you were an adult. And I think it does. It has a bit of everything. Like I don't want to spoil any of the jokes because like some of them are really good, and it's just like wow, like the writing is like pretty good in it.
Is it more like a joke about like is there like jokes about like the like video game stuff, or is it a joke about like Sonic and how his whole thing is going? Because like is there anything like that in the movie joke wise or?
Well, I mean, yeah, he does make there's like I can tell you about this one. Like for example, he's like um like there's like a turtle that's like trying to cross the street, and it's just about to get hit by a car, and Sonic picks it up, and he's like, "Oh man, it must suck being slow like all your life." But then he's like, "Oh well, you know what? This is your lucky day." And then he like runs really fast, and then you can see like the turtle's like got its mouth open and it's enjoying it. But then he like lets it go, and then the next frame is like the turtle's like shaking on the ground because he's obviously been going really fast. It's like there's things like that that you like don't expect that the film would do, but it does like an excellent job at being there. But again, it's like you're not going to get it's very family oriented, right? Like there's like a scene where because James Marsden's character he's got his wife in the I forget the wife's name, but like her sister in his sister-in-law doesn't like it. But then subsequently, like in order to make sure that she doesn't like call the police, they tie her up on a chair. So it's just really random. So there's like a bit with that as well. It's like all these things just kind of come off really like almost like 90s-esque. Like if you don't expect this film to be like Tarantino is all I'm saying, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah. Don't worry. I'm not expecting.
no, no, no. I'm
I'm
not
just
saying.
expecting. Yeah, I'm just expecting a
No, I'm
good
not.
time.
No, no.
That's like it's gonna be like '90s Sonic, where it's cool and edgy, maybe. Like,
Yeah, yeah. I'm not speaking to you. I know you won't have these kind of expectations, but I'm saying for like people who are listening, like don't expect it to be, um, you know, Tarantino. Don't expect it to be like the best movie ever. It's just a video game movie, and it does the video game movie well. I think it's better than Detective Pikachu because the plot at least. To say, there's obviously issues with the plot, like I mentioned, it's like there's like a scene where they have it like the Quicksilver scenes, right? Like how
slows
Quicksilver goes
down,
really,
maybe
yeah, yeah,
plays some
and he,
music. Yep.
yeah, yeah, and so there's a scene like that in the movie as well, and it's like, oh, okay, if he can go so fast that he can do that, like, why wasn't he able to like dodge like getting shot by it by the tranquilizing dart and stuff like that, like things like that. But it's like again, suspension of disbelief. You can at least kind of trust it because on the context of what's happening in that particular scene. But yeah, I think James Marsden, he's pretty good. I think the thing is he just plays like a bit of like a, a generic character in the sense of like he's just like a regular dude who's just trying to be like a good cop, but then he gets thrust into having to deal with Sonic because like he wants to become like a cop in like
The
the big
big
leagues. They're
city.
going to in the big city because like he's just a local cop at this small town. And he feels like all he's doing is just like, oh, he's like helping animals cross the road or little old ladies like take cats out of trees or stuff like that. He kind of wants to do like the good. He wants to be
It
like a
wants to, yeah,
real
it wants to be
cop.
the savior of the town type
Um,
of thing. My
yeah,
again,
yeah,
my real thing,
mm,
as you mentioned before, like it seems like you know, obviously Sonic's the main thing of the show as well as Jim Carrey.
mm.
Just because purely because the actual character is kind of like in Sonic mythos. Is there any
Mm.
hints of like a Sonic 2 slash? We're gonna get some Tails, Knuckles, and I'm just wondering how far are we gonna go with this thing in a sense of like, are we gonna have a whole cast
Um,
of characters? Do you think like in the future of like
Yeah, I think so. I think the thing is like if the movie does really well, um, and I think it might be because I think it's the box office at the moment at time of recording according to Wikipedia is 113 million. I think from what I understand is you want to triple your return of your original budget. If you can triple that, then your movie is considered a success, right? um, and and I think it's going to be able to do that. Now, whether it'll whether it'll get a sequel, who knows? I think like the positive reaction, like even the director was like thanking everybody, like it, and it's really funny because like if you kind of look at all the people who are kind of critical of the movie and kind of like, oh, this is just like a cash grab and oh like I was even watching somebody on YouTube that like like a group that I watch on YouTube and they just had like a really like negative take on it and like they kind of showed like, oh, here's the Metacritic score and here's the things like the Metacritic score is like 65 and then oh sorry or like maybe lower than that. And but they were just looking at the critic score, not the audience reviewer. But when you look at but whereas the director, when he promoted his film and stuff, he showed like the audience review from Rotten Tomato or the audience review from Metacritic. Now, obviously, I've mentioned before on the show as well that you know when you look at the audience score, it's going to be a very biased score most of the time because it's going to usually be, especially of like a big franchise film. Like if you like Harry Potter, chances are like, um, if you look at the audience score, it's going to be from Harry Potter fans. It's not going to probably be like average Joe Schmo who watched, Curse of the Blood Prince or whatever
And
the
they're just like, yeah, I'm
movie
gonna
is
review
called.
it now.
Yeah, it's probably not going to be that because because I'm pretty sure those films get really highly rated. I think the really good one for me for Harry Potter is like is that the Goblet of Fire?
Goblet of Fire is the fourth one with the different
Oh,
schools.
oh yeah, when they're in the competition.
Yeah,
Yeah, that one is probably the best one I've only got like the Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2 left, but I feel like that movie is really probably the best one that's come out from like all the
it's my
films.
favorite.
I've actually
It's my
seen.
favorite, so I agree. Like,
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm coming from it from a person who never grew up reading the book. I know people who did, but as someone who didn't read the books, like that's probably my favorite one. But I don't know if it's like a good one-to-one adaptation. I know like a lot of people said like the Order of the Phoenix book is like sorry, the movie's really short compared to what's in the book. The book's really big, but the movie's really short and cuts out a lot. But I mean, like, yeah, so, that's obviously like a movie constraint thing. There's only so much you can put in, and I've heard like a lot of it's like really kind of fillerish. Anyways, to kind of go back, like, yeah, like, so there is potential of like a sequel for Sonic. They even said that officially, like, there's a potential for a sequel for Sonic. But yeah, like, stick around and watch like the after credit ending, so to speak. Or there's like this is like not post credit, but like it's kind of like in the
it's
Marvel.
like when the first like few credits roll, like the main things, and then
Yeah,
like
there's something gonna
when
come.
they
Yeah,
basically
mid roll.
animate the credits, and then there'll be something else, and then after that they'll do the normal call of the credits where it crawls upwards.
Yeah, correct. That's exactly correct. Yeah,
Whatever you
it's
call
classic
that, mid
Marvel.
credits.
I think it's a mid roll, the mid credit. Yeah, there is like some hint of what might happen in the future, but yeah, I think like it's a solid movie. Um, I think I'd give it like a 7, like a 6.5, 7. It's definitely better than average, and I think like the thing is, if everything was well, look, there are some points deducted because Sonic does floss in it twice, so it loses 2 points because of that from me. But
As much just anything related to Fortnite always gets a -2 from me.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Like, there's a lot of stuff that obviously it's in there to appeal to kids, so you gotta like factor that in. It's just a very wholesome, simple plot. And I think like all the time, it's a very big shame that like the company that did the animation for this went out of business. I hope like in the future that there's more. We talked about it before with like BoJack Horseman. There's a lot of like animation companies that are like trying to unionize. Because clearly, like these companies, like then and these people who work so hard to do CGI, they aren't appreciated by the general audience. I can definitely attest to that. Like nobody sticks around for the credits and watches it. But like even though CGI was like 90% of the reason why Avengers Endgame was so good. Without the CGI, it wouldn't be as good as it is. Like none of these
It's
Marvel.
funny how we transition into that, where it's like I remember like the criticism in like 2010, anything with too much special effects, it was like this is like a video game, this is like a bad movie because it looks like a video
Hmm.
game, and now it's like,
But
and like
well, but I think
literally all the Marvel films are like literally like 80% special
no,
effects, and they're just like,
no,
oh, it's fine.
no, but I think like CGE from like even a decade ago is inferior by today's standards, right? CG now like they do so well that you don't even know that it's CG. Like there was that like kind of documentary where they did it for Mad Max Fury Road, and like a lot of like the cars being on fire and all this shit on it is like all CG, and I'm like that was all CG, cool, but like I didn't know, right? Because you'd think like or maybe they might do that for practical effect. Like, I don't know. But like, yeah, like all these people, like they don't get appreciated, and then big surprise, like these companies like foreclose. Like I think like the people who did the Sonic the Hedgehog movie did got an award for like the Life of Pi. Now they're defunct and they're closing. It's very sad for me to kind of see that stuff happen when they're probably the main reason the movie did so good as it did. Like obviously, look, like I said, Marsden, Terry, all the other kind of supportive actors in it, they all do a good job. Like, there's like a really funny, Robotnik has like this, like a sidekick, so to speak, who's like kind of like buys him coffee and, assistant, like an assistant, right? And he's really funny in it too, even though he doesn't really have much of a speaking role, but he's hilarious. Like, his interaction with Jim Carrey's like hilarious throughout the film. But like, that's what I'm saying. Like, these actors, especially for this film, if it still had like that nightmare looking Sonic, this movie would not be doing as good as it done, even with the writing that it has.
Yeah, I probably agree. It was such a turn off, and honestly, I feel like a lot of people just flocked to this movie,
And it felt like a cash
just purely
grab.
to
Like,
support it because of the change. I think.
yeah, I mean, because it felt like a cash grab before, right? Because it's like, oh well, yeah, like people are gonna watch this Sonic movie like
Sonic
regardless of
fans
what it.
don't really like, they'll watch it anyway, so let's just make this nightmare fuel Sonic.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the Sonic fandom kind of gets a lot of flack, because of like the fact that like a lot of the games kind of are really bad quality, but they still really love it, right? But here's the thing. I think ultimately what this kind of shows is that listening to the fans is the best decision that you need to take when it comes to franchise shows, rather than kind of going about it in a corporate way. Like, oh, I think whoever like came up with the idea of this Nightmare Sonic was that one guy who was like, oh, let's make him look realistic. Let's make him look like kind of like a regular hedgehog, but like kind of spruce it up and make him blue, right? And that's why we got the previous one. Whereas, people were like, this is shit. I can literally make this version of Sonic look like way better with 5 seconds of Photoshop. Right? Like, there was all these stuff coming out about how they could have made it better and how to make it look better, and they just did it like that. Obviously, it's different in the context of like a 3D animation and a film, but like, if you can make this abomination, you could make it look better. And they listen to the fans. The fans have kind of. I literally said my friend wanted to go watch this movie as a meme, and I told her, no way I'm gonna go and watch Sonic unless they make him look good. And then they did, and so I was forced to go watch it, and I loved it.
It's
It's
probably
really good.
the best bet you've ever made.
Yeah, probably the best. Yeah, the best bet was when I saw the results of all their changes, and it was like, oh, it actually looks good. Well, shit, I guess I'll have to go watch it. They do a lot of like video game stuff as well. Like, there's like a scene where he gets hit and he's got like a bag of like you've maybe seen it in the trailers how like they've got these rings and he goes through the rings. Like, essentially what the
They're like
rings
portals, I
function.
think it looks like.
Yeah, correct. So like the rings function as portals. Like, you hold them and you think of a place that you want to go and you throw it, and then it turns into a portal. And so they become like the MacGuffin that they have to go find because he loses his rings. And so there's a scene where like he gets hit and then his bag of rings kind of explode and go all over the ground, much like how
Does it
it
have
is
the
in the
original
video
sound
game.
effect?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
don't know if it's the original, but it is like, the sound
It's
of
that
like coins
sound,
dropping,
like, yeah.
ding ding ding. Like, yeah, I don't know, I can't impression of it, right? Yeah. So yeah, it's that. There's a lot of like references. They even have a so like, because he's zooming around this town. There's like a guy who he's kind of like Bigfoot to this one guy who claimed like, oh, there's this blue devil running around, and he shows like a picture of what he thinks it looks like, and it's that Sonic picture. The Sonic picture, like
Yeah,
where,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's that picture. So they even reference that in the
Holy
show.
hell.
Yeah, so like there's all these little nods to like fan culture and just the Sonic franchise as a whole. And I think it kind of opens up to video game, like, this is the thing. The Pikachu movie, Detective Pikachu, kind of opens it up, like, to kind of, but Pikachu, like Pokemon and stuff, you can kind of almost say is almost as popular because of like the anime, because people grew up with it, right? Like, not as popular, but people love the games, obviously. But when I think Pokemon, I also think the anime and stuff like that. Sonic is like purely video game, and
Mm.
there is like there was like a 3D uh, cartoon that's actually based on one of the Sonic games that have apparently been doing really good as well. I haven't watched it though.
It was like Sonic
Um,
Colors or something, Chaos Rings or something like
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah, but that's not what the show's called, right? I don't know. But anyway, the
I
point
don't,
is like,
I don't know,
anyway,
man. Sonic.
Sonic. Anyway, the point is, go watch this movie. It's pretty good. And again, I think there's a lot of it. Like I think we mentioned it last week. How there's a lot of people like um, running like kind of this weird defense of like Birds of Prey in like saying like oh like Sonic has like a bunch of like homophobic like comments. I left the cinema with my child and we watched Birds of Prey, and it was just really weird.
Well,
It's just
first of
like
all,
wait,
is there any homophobic things in Sonic?
no, no, not at all. Not from what I saw. Like I don't remember a single kind of like yeah, like it's
It
really
just
weird. I
sounds. It
feel like
sounds like someone just obviously didn't watch the movie or doesn't know anything about the movie, and they're just trying to
I
shun
don't
this
no no
movie.
no no because these just all sound like bots, dude. That's what it is. It's a marketing ploy, but it's just a really weird marketing ploy. And why that it was like why would it be like Harley Quinn fans attacking Sonic? It doesn't make any sense. But I think the big fear, and I think the big reason why, like a lot of people, like I was reading some other things online where people were like, Sonic made 70 million, and this is bullshit or something like that. And I was just like, what kind of title is that, And I think like the problem is there's a lot of people who kind of, whether they kind of review movies or whether they, kind of review pop culture things. A lot of the critics kind of don't like it when fans get to have some kind of creative control over because again it kind of takes away from like critics and their ability to have a say because like I mentioned like the director of this film he didn't give a shit about what the critics gave Sonic. He only cared about like what the fans gave it, right? So they don't want that, like people within the kind of reviewing hegemony kind of don't want to lose that kind of power, and I kind of see it as well if they kind of don't double down on this whole oh well Sonic is a bad movie or the fans who like Sonic are toxic, or if you don't like Harley Quinn you're a sexist or something like that. They do that in order to try and force you to guilt you to watch a movie. But like let's say you went in into an ice cream store and you like vanilla or chocolate ice cream and you tell them that and they had like I don't know like what's a flavor?
The mint one, the mint
No,
chocolate.
no, people, weird people still like mint ice cream. I'm sorry, I didn't get the whole mint ice cream thing, right? But like, let's say you had like Brussels sprouts, like as a flavor of ice cream, right? And like you're like, well, fuck you, I don't want to eat Brussels sprouts ice cream. And then the person selling you the ice cream tries to make you feel bad about not wanting to eat their Brussels sprouts ice cream. That's what it's like. Um, I think ultimately like all these people, when they try and like talk bad down to a movie like this, they only make themselves look bad, right? And meanwhile, people don't give a shit about whether they look bad liking Sonic. They just like Sonic and will just go and watch it and appreciate the fact that studios don't call them out as being bad and like oh well like I mean look at the whole issue with Ryan Johnson, right? Like Ryan Johnson was like oh no, it was a good thing that like I did what I did for the rise of the Last Jedi, because it's one of those things where it's like oh well I know better than the fans what they want. They're a bunch of idiots and I know what's good for you know what I mean.
Yeah. But that's the thing. It's like it's not only that, but it's like I think just social media has just completely ruined the relationship of, I guess, a lot of things of not only just directors slash writers with fans.
Hmm.
But not only
That's
that,
true.
but not only that, but I honestly feel like it's also ruined in general critics and what they say, because the critics used to be a particular class of people that they get invited to things and and they still do, just that they would get the inside scoop, and that's what they're fighting for. I feel like
Sure.
a general fan, like whether it be you or I, if we like obviously report on every single article and did all these types of things, we would kind of have a say. And like if we got really big, for example, we would have sway at basically what would
Yeah,
happen if
and
like Sonic changing his thing. And it's like critics, like these websites and these critics who write for papers, and they're actually like journalists, quote unquote. They get a loss of power because people from like their home have a say, and they don't like
mhm.
that because they lose their sense of control of the narrative that they want to kind of spin slash control.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. It's 100. So yeah, ultimately, yeah. this first Sonic movie, and I think there's probably going to be a second one if it continues to do well during this holiday period. Yeah, it's going to be very successful. And yeah, I look forward to seeing more from it. But yeah, I'll go on to the other thing that I watched this week, which was Mythic Quest Raven's Banquet. Very much like a mouthful, but essentially it's a show that's like a Apple TV exclusive, and it got renewed for a second season as well.
Let's
It's
to be
only
honest,
nine
everything on Apple TV is basically being renewed for a second season.
renewed. Okay,
Because like,
yeah.
look, what Apple TV, like, they, they're still trying to find its feet before they just like, yeah, let's, get some new stuff going on. Like, it took a very long time before Netflix had like their House of Cards or Stranger Things.
That's true. Yeah, and so it's basically about a video game company, and just kind of dealing with the personalities within it. So Mythic Quest is supposed to be like an analog for like World of Warcraft. It's like the longest running, most popular MMORPG online. And after all this time, they're just about to release the newest expansion, which is called Mythic Quest Raven's Bank, hence the name of the show. It'd be interesting to see whether next season is going to be called like the same thing, or whether it's going to just be called Mythic Quest, and then it's like the expansion, the new name, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be interesting because I think that's probably a better way to go about it than people kind of like associate like it just being like the Mythic Quest series, which in and of itself almost sounds like a like a
I
series
think
of
it is a game, Mythic Quest. I know there's Dragon Quest, but I think there actually
the
is a
Dragon
game
Quest.
called.
I think maybe you're thinking like Del Toro Quest.
No, I
That's like a
swear to
season
God, there's a
four.
game called Mythic Quest, and it's like a one-off in like the
There's
NES or something. But I
there's
don't know.
there's Mythic. There's like a game
I
called
do
Mythic.
know Mythic, but regardless, this is just it's like obviously a fictionalized video game
Yeah, exactly.
and
Although,
about like people developers making a video game. My whole
although
yeah.
although that being said, a lot of the like game footage and some of the stuff that they use in it are obviously used from like games from Ubisoft, who I think like they even mention in the show that like they have the parent company in Vancouver, so there's like all these French talking
The
people.
thing
So
is,
it's obviously
I think the main reason was because I remember at E3 they revealed this TV show, and it was at the Ubisoft press conference, and everyone's just like, "What the hell is this?" It's not a video game thing. So I feel like they must have bankrolled something. Like Ubisoft must have been like bankrolled it.
I mean, I think it's obviously like a partnership between Apple and Ubisoft to kind of make a show together. And so like a lot of the kind of 3D aspects of it and video, like it's basically, you know how I forget what the game's called, but you know how there was like a game on Ubisoft and it was essentially about like samurais fighting Vikings, fighting
For
crusaders,
Honor?
people. For Honor, yeah. There's a lot of like screen shots that it seems to be like from that game, or like being like reskinned from that game, and stuff like that. So it's like it's not very clear how the like I don't know. At certain times, it feels like the game is World of Warcraft, but then sometimes they'll show other things. So I think they keep it very vague, exactly like what the gameplay is like exactly in the game, which is fine because the game isn't necessarily the main focus on it. It's like the characters that are around it. So you have like the creative director who's called like Ian Grimm. Instead of Ian, it's Ian. So he's kind of like the like enthusiastic and like almost like kind of crazy creative director. He's the guy from Always Sunny. So he kind of plays like a very similar
Mac.
role.
Yeah.
He plays like a very similar role to that. Whereas you have like Ashley Birch. She's kind of like I think she's like a voice actor.
She was like Tiny Tina, and she was like, I already know from Hey Ash what you're playing.
Yeah, she's from that, and then like she's in like a lot of stuff. I'm pretty.
I think in recent years she's like gotten popularity, but like I only knew her from Hey Ash, and then I think from that series, she got the role of like Tiny Tina, and then it just kind of went from there.
Yeah, and she does. I know that she does like a lot of dubs for anime and stuff. I'm pretty sure she did it for like Steins Gate and stuff. So she's like the only other person that I found familiar from the show. But like the other character that's kind of like the big one in it is Poppy Lee, and she's kind of like the lead engineer of the show, and she's like Australian as well. Like I wasn't sure if she was like Australian or New Zealand, but then later on they kind of like officially kind of say like, oh no, she's Australian. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. That they reference that. But yeah, there's like so she's kind of like the how there's like a straight guy, like the in like a comedy act there's always someone who's like the
He's like, nah,
straight
man, you
guy
got
and
to
the
do it
funny
this
guy.
way. We're
Yeah,
gonna get in
yeah. So she's
trouble.
yeah. So she's kind of the person who kind of reels in Iron in when he does like crazy shit, because he'll just be like, all right, your shovel looks really weird. We have to delay the game in order to fix the shovel. That's like the basics of the very first episode. Um, and then there's like a new like assistant, like the who's like this crazy, almost like psycho murderer kind of person in it. There's like a award-winning, a Nebula-winning writer who's like this old guy who, like he kind of talks almost like poetically, and like kind of like if you can kind of imagine what this kind of person is, he kind of exaggerates when he talks and has a very very large like lexicon and stuff. You've got I forget his name, but he's Abed in Community,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. He's hilarious in it as well. He's like kind of like um he's very different to a lot of the roles I've seen him in, because he's like the monetization manager or whatever. So he like a lot of the people hate him because he always tries to like, oh yeah, hey, we're gonna put this loot box in here, or oh, we're gonna do this and that. And they kind of don't like it. But yeah, I think the main thing is like it's kind of everybody kind of dealing with things that are happening in this video game kind of developing company. And ultimately, I kind of find like the show is like okay. I'll
Is
probably
it mainly
give.
because, like, for example, like, is like, a lot of your entertainment just because like you're into video games and you know the industry? Well, it's like if you were a person who didn't know anything about
Mm,
video games and looking into it, would you just be like, "What is this show?" Like that's my real question for people who wouldn't be aware of stuff like that.
yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like with something like Mythic Quest, like it's a lot better at like showing the kind of video game side of things than let's say, or like kind of the nerd culture side of it than let's say like Big Bang Theory or something, because you're literally within a video game studio. But there's like they kind of deal with a lot of issues within the video game. Like for example, there's a character who's called like Pootie something, which is obviously supposed to be a reference to PewDiePie, right? And he's like supposed to be like this young, like 14-year-old like streamer on Twitch, and oh yeah, he loves like Mythic Quest, and oh, but then like later in like some of the other episodes, he's like, ah, you know what? Fuck Mythic Quest, I'm gonna go play this other game now, and that's like a big deal because he's like the biggest streamer in the world. But then like they all hate him, so it's like it's very funny. So it's like it's pretty it's interesting because obviously they make a lot of kind of comparisons to things in the real world and like people or video games, or like like they reference like crunch, right, which is like something that happens in the video game industry where people kind of work overtime in order to get games out, quote unquote, on time, but not usually having the video game creators and engineers like compensated for it, so they don't get paid overtime and stuff. So that becomes like a point of contention. But yeah, ultimately, like I think it's just like it's okay. It's like not anything like amazing to write about. Even like when I was reading about it, on Reddit, and like people were like, oh, like episode five's really really good, like, and but everything else is kind of bad. And I'm like, I watched the episode of episode five, and it's kind of like it doesn't really have anything to do with the main plot. It's kind of with these other two video game developers who make a game, but it's like their rise and fall, so to speak. So it's an interesting
It's
slice,
like
but
it's
it was
like trying to
like,
tell a story about like video games and how it could work. Just that like it probably sounds like, yeah, episode 5 or whatever it is like
well, they
the
made it
one
out to be.
it sounds like the episode 5 seems to be the one that like has more heart to it, where it's like it's playing
Which
it
is
straight almost.
true. Well, which is true. It's definitely the more different one because it's like, oh, this like the video game industry in 1991 and then 92, and then it's like these two people meet and then they fall in love and then they make a video game studio together and then trying to make a game together. But then it's like, oh, like what happens when like they have to kind of like sell the game out a little bit more to mega corporations and stuff like that. But the thing is, like, it was like okay. Wasn't this amazing episode? Like some of the other stuff. And here's the thing, like some of the characters are interesting, but then other characters like not so much, or there's not enough time spent on them, or like the gimmick wears off way too quickly. But again, like these are just like kind of half an hour episodes, and it's only 9, and maybe because they're just trying to dip their foot in the water in terms of like what they can do about it. Like maybe with something like shows on streaming, there's usually only like a 10 episode or 12 episode like reach. Like I don't see this being like Always Sunny, where like they have like well, it isn't Always Sunny usually like a 24
No, no,
episode long
it's actually relatively short.
Oh,
Like
okay,
10
per
episodes
season,
or so.
really.
I think that's why It's Always Sunny is like more fresher than a lot of like the sitcoms these days, where like I don't know, everyone likes Brooklyn Nine-Nine and all that, but it's like I
Mm-hmm.
think It's Always Sunny is like top tier purely because the creative process of it is just like we'll have like 10 episodes or maybe 12 episodes and like we'll focus on one particular thing. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that's why kind of It's Always Sunny has been fresh for like over like 14 years.
Okay.
But yeah, I know what you mean. Where it's like yeah, sometimes with a lot of those shorter the sitcom shows, they just kind of put
Yeah,
stuff
I
out
mean,
there.
yeah, I mean, like look at like CW, look at like all those kind of shows. Like they're obviously trying to pad it because they're trying to sell you ads in between break periods, right? Whereas like with this, it's like it's Apple's first step into trying to make something. Alongside with what's that show with the Aquaman guy in it? Where
Jason
everybody's
Momoa,
blind. Yeah,
the
where
C
everybody's
one.
like
It's
blind
called
and shit.
C. There's like C. There's one about I don't know,
Yeah,
like what
that
if the
one.
women continue the space race. There's Dickinson, which is just basically the Dickinson author, but like weird comedy thing. And like I think it's like the only other one that I see Goss is like the one with Jennifer Aniston about like it's called like The Morning Show or something like that. I feel like
Mm.
those like it's basically See The Morning Show and probably Mythic Quest is probably like the three main pillars that they currently have right now for
Okay.
Apple. I would
Yeah,
say,
and
but that's the thing. I haven't really watched any of those shows, so
yeah, well, I haven't seen C. I heard that was like okay. Like the production was good, but like the story was like kind of like eh. Whereas like Mythic Quest, like I think like if they kind of fine tune, because I kind of feel like it felt a little bit soapboxy at some times. Like it's just like they're kind of preaching to themselves about like there's like a whole episode where it was about having uh like a group of female like young female coders are coming in to the workplace and there's literally only two women in the show that are female engineers, but they kind of make it out to be like, oh well, like that's because like um all women within their own industry have to fight each other in order to get the position they're in. So the two characters actually hate each other, which is kind of funny, but it's like kind of really soapboxy because I think like in the video game industry, it doesn't really reflect that. Like even though it's like a male dominated space, I don't think that presenting it in a way that it's like, oh well, all women within the video game industry have to fight each other for the same job. Like that's not how a meritocratic society exists, and so it kind of fails to present itself in a way that didn't feel like it was trying to soapbox at you, if that makes sense. But yeah, like ultimately, like the characters, like I said, like I think Ian's character kind of gets a little bit annoying to me because it's just like he's kind of um always just he's kind of like the Sheldon, or like he's like
he's
the
like the one
the
nerd character where it's like yeah, you got to do the thing.
well, he's not even a nerd. He's not a nerd though. He's like the artiste. He's like the artist. So he anything he says has to then be like that's why he's kind of like the character who Poppy like kind of gets annoyed at because she has to then program his idea into the game. And that's obviously like if he just has like, oh, I have this one idea, but now you have to program it all because I'm not a programmer. I'm just like the idea man almost, right? So that's the thing. Like it kind of wanes because it's like how there's always one character who causes all the hijinks because they're getting everybody into trouble. Like that's what like Ian's character basically represents. Whereas Poppy's character is like a lot more like grounded, and stuff. And maybe that's like a, it's like that whole classic thing where it's like, when you um grow up watching SpongeBob, you see yourself at, like, when I was a kid, I'm like, oh, SpongeBob's pretty cool, like he does that. Oh, Squidward's like such a wet blanket. But now, like as an adult, it's like, okay, you understand a little bit of what Squidward's going through, like having to deal with someone like SpongeBob all the time. You know what I mean? So I don't know if it's like a little bit like that, but I think ultimately, like, the characters kind of seem really one note, and there's not a lot of like interplay with it, with certain characters all the time. In some episodes, there are like, oh, hey, it's like this character and this character interacting with each other, but it's not like they're spending a whole lot of time because each episode's only like 30 minutes, you know.
Yeah.
So, but then sometimes like some episodes feels like they've dragged on forever because there's like not much happening. So yeah, so if you kind of like, it's like interesting in a sense of like how they did everything like alongside of like Ubisoft and stuff, like to try and make a video game show. Before we were before the show started, I was like saying like, oh, it kind of reminds me of like this other show which I watched when I was like a young kid, and it's called. We found what it is. It's called Crash Zone, which is a Australian children's science fiction television series, which was kind of unique in that it was the first series to examine early use of the internet as well as video game industry and artificial intelligence. So it was like a bunch of kids who were like trying to make a game, but then they had I guess like a online kind of AI avatar who would like help them, and then they're also kind of doing all this other kind of crazy shit in the background. So yeah, it was just really funny because I just had like a flashback of like my
You're like,
childhood.
yeah,
Like,
what is that?
yeah, I was like, oh, and we found it. Originally Canadian because we grew up with a lot of Canadian TV shows and stuff, but it was actually an Australian one. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. But yeah, Mythic Quest. Yeah, I mean, give it a watch if you kind of like, like that Always Sunny kind of like comedy ish. Oh well, actually, I don't even. Nah, Always Sunny is way funnier.
Yeah, well,
Like this is that's like
I haven't
yeah,
watched the
like
show, but I can tell you, it's always it's because Always Sunny has Charlie Day, who's always like the wild
yeah,
card, like crazy person. I feel like
yeah. You see, Charlie Day's like that character,
and also you
whereas
get
like I
Danny
feel like
DeVito as well. So like,
yeah, that's true. Yeah, whereas like I think like Rob takes that kind of role in this show, but he's kind of like the artist. And the thing is, it does kind of show like how the industry and the people kind of interact in that kind of like the relationships, because obviously like the creative side obviously butts head with the gamer side, and then like but they both hate like the business monetization people, and then you have like the game testers who that's like Ashley Birch and stuff, and they get treated like shit because they just test the games, like they just get paid minimum wage to play video games, which obviously sounds like a pretty cool job, but like it doesn't pay.
yeah, and
And
obviously
that's just,
I've seen people like speed run games. It must be so annoying to be like, I'm gonna test out this game and someone breaks the game already. You're like, man, it took me like
well, that's
15
that's the
hours to figure out like this one area.
hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that's the point. Ultimately, like it's supposed to test the game so they can figure out the bugs. But yeah, ultimately, if you have some time, maybe watch Mythic Quest. But otherwise, you can give it
Okay, like an all right review for
an
Mythic
alright
Quest, I guess.
review.
Yeah, an all right review. Uh, moving on to I guess another streaming thing. This would be a show that I've been watching and been very excited for. This would be Locke Key. This show is based off a comic book written by Joe Hill, aka Stephen King's son. And it basically follows the Locke family, where tragic incidents happened to the Locke family, where their father was murdered. So instead, they moved to a small town and trying to relive their life, and kind of it's a lot of family ordeals of the mom struggling, and obviously the kids are struggling, especially not only to fit into a new school, but also to deal with their missing father. But the interesting part about this is sort of just being a drama in that particular way, as well as they move to this house, which is called the Key House, and this is an old house that Rendell Locke, which is the dad, basically used to live in. And what they do slowly find out is that the house is full of these keys, these mystical keys, and his key does a particular action or a particular type of thing. So a lot of the kids, the kids kind of discover the keys as they go, and they figure out what they do. And that's part of the mystery of kind of the show, where there's this kind of evil lady called but it's not Bode, because Bode's the kid. I actually forgot her name. But as I think, but essentially her whole thing is she just wants all the keys, because they have all the power, and she just basically wants to control everything. So that's just kind of the main premise of Locke Key. So I'm a big fan of the comic, and I think a lot of people, like, this is like hailed as like I'd say if there was a top 100 list of best comics of all time, or even top 50, I'm pretty sure Locke Key would be in there, 100%. Yeah, go ahead if you had any questions.
I was going to ask. Well, the first thing is that I didn't know that Joe Hill was Stephen King's son. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's
Look
really
at a picture of
interesting.
Joe Hill, and then you're like, okay, that looks exactly like Stephen King does.
Oh, wow.
Because I think the whole thing is like he just probably didn't want to capitalize on his dad's name, so he's like, I want to make something for myself, kind of do it. And you can definitely feel the tone of horror in the comic book. I feel like the main thing of this Locke and Key TV show is that you definitely feel less of that horror tone, and I feel like whoever the showrunners were of the show who running it on Netflix, they're just kind of like, hey, we want to make this a little bit more kid friendly, which is really strange because you got something like Stranger Things, which does have quite a lot of horror elements. So essentially, this, like, if I want to place it in terms, Locke and Key is more of the Netflix version of a series of unfortunate events over Stranger Things, and I wish it was kind of more like a Stranger Things, because I think there's a lot of things that you do miss, and a lot of things that have more higher stakes if it has that more horror adult element to it. But not to say that the TV show is bad at all. It just has a different tone from what I was expecting. And I think, like, yeah, if you didn't know anything about the comics, it might be fine for you, but definitely it would benefit a lot with its harder edge, because there's a lot of points where the main evil lady, her name's Dodge, she does a lot of horrific stuff. For example, like, she kind of uses her abilities to not only kill people, obviously, but does some really interesting things of kind of like manipulating people who are desperate and in need. And it's like kind of this very, like, kind of, it's really dark, and because like the person that Dodge manipulates is a mom who has a disabled son, and a single mom who has a disabled son. So it's like it's very, like, dark in that sense. And I think in the TV show they downplay a lot of that kind of darker tone for the rest of the world. But the main premise and the main structure of the show is relatively the same. I would say there's a few changes here and there. But the main premise of, the kids, Tyler, Kinsey, and Bode, kind of exploring the key house and figuring out what these keys do. Like some of these keys, like one of the main ones, the ghost key, which you enter a door, you turn into a ghost, and it looks like your body's dead, but you can float around. You got the music box key, which obviously, like, when you find a music box, you can tell someone what to do and they'll do it. So yeah, there's all these different there's the anywhere key, which is the main key where you can literally just open a door and you'll go place to place to place to place. So like all the real hook of Hook and Key is just figuring out what these keys are. What do they do, and and how they're going to be used in a particular situation. I think that's the thing that to come back on, because it's really unique and interesting concept and idea to have something that has, like, unique powers, and it's not like everyone can use them as well. It's not just a spell, for example. But yeah,
oh no, I was gonna say, with, like, the thing with Joe Hill, like, I funnily enough, like, read a few comics by him recently, because
I think there's a Joker comic on, like, he's recently done, if I'm not mistaken.
I think there's that, but that's not the one that I read. But there was, like, a what essentially was like I think it's called Hill House Comics, and essentially it's like a derivative of, like, DC. And there's a few stuff that he's doing in there, and I kind of like. I was like, you know what? I'll give it a go. I'll give a because like obviously like a collaboration with DCLC, see what it's about, and it's like just like these horror comics, like it's like what I think is like one's called Basket of Heads, and it's like this girl, and she was supposed to see her boyfriend. But then during like a break-in, he tells her to go hide, and then when she eventually kind of gets out, she sees that one of the people who broke into the house is still there, and like she manages to defend herself and chop off the guy's head, um, with this like ancient axe thing. But the problem is he's beheaded, but he can still talk. So now she's trying to figure out like what happened to her boyfriend. Meanwhile, she's like slowly like accruing all these like chopped off heads of people who are talking to her and shit like that. So like yeah, it's really weird.
Mm.
But you know the art's pretty good, and like I'm kind of invested in the story. So like yeah, if like it seems to be like a pretty interesting premise with what she mentioned. So do you feel like that it is a good? Did you read the Lock and Key comics at all?
Yes, I did. I
Yeah.
remember when I first discovered it. I literally read it in like a weekend, basically.
Hmm.
All the issues were out at that point, which I think was like 2014. I just heard really good things about it. I just read it in one go, and I just really enjoyed it. Um, and yeah, like I think the TV show does a really good adaptation of it. Obviously, as I mentioned, the tone's a little bit different. And they do change a lot of things, but I feel like because I originally thought that this was going to be a one and done season type of thing.
Hmm.
Because I'm just like, okay, like I know the clear start, middle, and end of this, and I don't think they'll do too much to kind of stretch it out. And
Hmm.
basically the first season is the kind of whole graphic novel kind of segment. So then whatever season two is going to be something completely different. And obviously they change a few things, obviously, to get to that season two part, which I don't mind. I think originally when I was watching it, I'm like, okay, they didn't have this part because I think the main thing is, and the worst thing probably about this season and this adaptation is Dodge, the evil character, the villain. You don't really get their premise of like who they are, why they're trying to do this, and kind of get their presence. You don't really feel it that much in this show. Whilst in
Hmm.
the comic book, Dodge is literally like everywhere all the time, scheming something,
Hmm.
trying to get the keys from the Locke
So
family.
is it more like her character in this first season is more like they're building up to that, and this is more about like the kids trying to figure out what these keys do?
More or less. Like I feel
Yeah.
like because it's only really up until like episode like 3/4 is when, because the main the little kid is the I think his name's Bode. He basically
Mm.
is the one who discovers all the keys, and it's up until like episode 2/3 is when they discuss like, oh hey, there's this evil lady trying to get all the keys, but then they don't really like act on it too much up until like episode 6 or 7. So there's like a kind of a gap almost of like what the kids are doing versus like what the evil character is kind of doing, and the evil character is doing their own thing. But obviously what you later find out, like it obviously later on in the season, you're like, okay, I understand what they were going for. So it's like hopefully
Hmm.
in season 2 they'll expand more on that, because like the Dodge character is a very interesting character. And I don't want to spoil because there's a lot of different, I guess, uh stuff that comes out like, oh, that's kind of cool how they did that and things like that. There's a lot of mystery discovery, so
So
it does have a lot of
in
that Goonies feel to it.
in terms of like you know how like we recently watched The Boys, which ended up being like I feel like that's my best show of last year. And that kind of like adapted the boys, for the most part, but then kind of switched it up towards the end to allow for like a second season. With something like Lock and Key, is it like a very similar thing, as in it's adapted everything from the Lock and Key kind of comic book series, but now it's kind of opened itself for a little bit of like some original content, or is there still some stuff that's left from the original comics left to explore going forward into season two?
I feel like there's still some stuff where they can adapt and I guess expand upon, especially on like exactly for example, there's a few things of like, how do these keys work, for example, don't really get explained, and they do get explained in the comic, and a few other things of like, what is the deal with their dad and these keys, and who's kind of like the cast kind of on there. Like I don't really spoil too much, but it's kind of in that vein. But I feel like they do a really good job at adapting a lot of the things, because a lot of it is kind of hard to explain on how the keys kind of work.
Mhm.
They do change up a few things. For example, a lot of the side characters. For example, Kinsey, the girl, basically, like I think like in the comic, it's kind of very briefly done, where like she kind of falls in love with this punk guy, but then she falls in love with another guy later on. But in this show, they give him bigger personalities. That so instead of them just kind of being like side kind of characters, they're kind of bigger characters in their own. Where I think they're called the Savini group. Obviously, joke on Tom Savini, who was like the makeup guy for like Dawn of the Dead and all that. And basically, they're trying to make a horror film. So there's a lot of in jokes of like, let's fix it in post. So I found that was pretty funny. So there's like stuff like that going on. I forgot the Tyler Locke, the main kind of like son of the Locke family. He has his own thing of like who he's trying to be and discover. He's like kind of haunted from how his dad died, as well as trying to fit in and trying to fall in love with this girl at the new school as well. So there's a lot of school drama as well. I think they do a really good job at doing that as well. I think my main probably criticism is that there's probably not enough interaction between the Locke kids themselves. I feel like instead of them interacting as a family, they more interact as kind of like, oh yeah, well, everyone has a friend to hang out with and do things with.
Mhm.
And I feel like you miss out on a lot of cool character moments when you do that, purely because it's a family where they lost their dad, and it's them kind of struggling of a new place and discovering all these types of things. And they do have scenes, but they're very much like kind of like touch on it a little bit and kind of going away. For example, like there's one scene where it's called the head key, where you can go inside someone's head and look through their memories and
Mhm.
kind of thoughts. And Kinsey, she when her dad died, she was really scared, and she was always kind of timid that way. So essentially, they had this creative idea of taking out her anxiety slash like bad worries out of her head completely. Like it's a physical thing that she takes out of her head, and takes it away. And they do a little bit on it, but like in the comic book, they do a lot more interesting concepts of what happens if you take away like one of the personalities
Yeah,
that
one
makes
of
you
the yeah
afraid.
one of these important parts that make who you are. Yeah,
Yeah, so like in the
interesting.
comic book they explore it more. In the TV show, it's a little bit more of a shallow explanation for it. So there's a
Mm.
few things like that where I kind of get a little bit like, oh, okay, that's what they're doing. Interesting part is, as I mentioned, when they were changing tone, the mum in the comic book is like an alcoholic who can't take care of her kids, and she's like
Sure.
basically a mess. In this, they don't really do that much. Understandably, she's just kind of there for the sake of kind of being there. But and
Mhm.
she doesn't really have much to do, so I kind of feel bad for like her character in the TV show, because she doesn't have much to do. But like overall, I think this is a pretty worthy adaptation. It's been a long journey to get here, because I think Fox tried to make this into a TV show like probably about 10 years ago, and they said their version was like too dark, so they didn't. It was like a pilot, and they just said, yeah, we're not doing it. Um, so the interesting part of this is I'm just yeah, I Lock and Key I think is a pretty good it's pretty damn good adaptation. I think it gets the right you know dot points kind of down for the TV show, and I think it's quite interesting because the mystery of who the Lock kids, what they're doing with the keys, and I feel like that's a really interesting concept. And yeah, I just really enjoy the world, and I think the Lock kids have a really good chemistry with each other, as a family unit. They got the little kid, what is it, from It, who got his arm cut off at the start of the movie.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
him to play Bird, so he's kind of in there, and I feel like
Yeah.
yeah, all the actors do a really good job. Um, and I'm just excited for a season two, because yeah, it's kind of semi uncharted territory, and I feel like season two will be a better season, purely because of everything that was built up, and I feel like Bird's gonna be more. Dodge, the evil character, is gonna be more of a presence, which is I think probably the best part of the Lock and Key comic book, is just yeah the scheming and like going place to place, and I feel like that's more interesting. So overall, I would highly suggest Lock and Key as kind of your next binge TV show. That's for sure. And yeah, and obviously you should probably read it as well if you do have the time, and maybe have a comparison as well. That's kind of like yeah,
Interesting.
because
Yeah, because well, like I said, like I enjoy. There was this other comic. I didn't read all of it. Called, but like yeah, like again, I think they're called Hill Comics under DC at the moment, and they seem to be a pretty interesting take on like the horror genre in a comic medium, so to speak. So yeah,
yeah, it's a,
I definitely can see the appeal.
yeah, absolutely, and maybe they can make it a little bit more horror in the second season. You know, like it's not out of whack to change tone, and I feel like yeah, this is kind of getting like middling kind of reviews, make it like a 7.5, like 8 around that type of thing, where it's not going to blow you away like the first season of Stranger Things is, and you know essentially it didn't 100% focus on one particular style slash tone. I think it's a good solid show. But yeah, as I mentioned, it's not going to be the first season of Stranger Things. But if you want something in kind of that field, this is pretty much kind of that type of show. And hopefully in the second season they do more and experiment with not only the Keys but who are the Locke family as well, and different tone. Um, so that's Lock and Key, and the final show that I watched purely because it was like Halloween and actually came out during Halloween is High Fidelity. This is a reboot, a TV reboot, gender swap reboot of the movie High Fidelity, which is also a book. So the original 2000 movie is played by John Cusack, and he gets a lot of different people. And this one, you've got Zoe Kravitz to kind of replace John Cusack's character. And the whole point, the premise of High Fidelity is it just follows Zoe Kravitz's character, where she kind of talks to the camera as us, and she goes down through her breakups throughout her life, and explaining like why who the people who she's dated and why they broke up. And that's kind of like the main premise of the show. It's kind of going the most recent breakup. She kind of has a self-reflect of, these are the people I've dated, and I'm gonna talk to the audience about like how I met the person, how I fell in love with the person, what was their personality, and why we eventually broke. So that's kind of the main premise of the show. She owns a vinyl store, which is basically it shines a light on, I guess, music elitists, which I really like, and they actually did keep in the TV show, which I was really excited for. Overall, I feel like this is a pretty good solid adaptation, I think, of the source material. And that's the thing. It's like, if you want to watch High Fidelity in its best possible way, I would still recommend the 2000 movie with John Cusack in it. Because like in this one, obviously it's a slightly more modern take on a few things. But I still think like the acting is a lot better with John Cusack, and I feel like the story, because I think in this one, since it's a TV show, you would think they would have more time to explore the different exes, like one per episode, for example, and kind of explore like their personality and their whole story behind the relationship. They don't do it that much. They skim through a lot of kind of personality traits of like the exes and things like that, because the whole point of the show is, I'm gonna review all my exes and talk to them modern day and see where they are, and see like if they're going good, they're going bad, what's their life in perspective to mine. And you'd think with a 10 episode TV show they would have a lot more space to open up and talk about this, but they really don't. And it's a lot of it is more just like setting up new romance, which it's like it kind of feels like a romantic comedy type of thing almost, which I would rather like the retrospective, let's go back memory lane type of route. But yeah, in the movie they have much more like character. For example, like one of the characters in the 2000 movies played by Catherine Zeta-Jones, and she's like one of those type of people where she says a lot of stuff but it's all fluff. Like she's like, oh yeah, I know about politics and I know all about this stuff, but it's all fluff. She has this really great personality, and she stands out. But like in the TV show, they replaced her obviously with the same type of personality, but she's like an Instagram influencer. But it's not as insightful or as impactful of a character. And I think it really does come back down to the acting and some of the writing of it. But as I mentioned before, I was surprised that they did keep a lot of the same type of scenes in it. And there's a few things where you can pretty much, some of the scenes are one for one from the movie and the TV show. I think they did a pretty good as transitioning it to modern day stuff. One of the things I was mentioning before about music snobbery, because the original one had the 2000s, everyone's at the record store, they're talking about like new waves type of stuff, and I think like the modern day version, there's ones where for example, they're selling vinyl, and for example, they touch upon one person was a Michael Jackson record. They talk about like, is it ethical to sell a Michael Jackson record, like stuff like that. So I was surprised that they put a modern spin on it, but it wasn't 100% like a yes or no type of thing, because the whole point of this is just they essentially Zoe Kravitz works at a record store with two other people, and they just talk about music and their top 5 favorite. They basically love their lists, basically. And essentially there's one nerdy guy character which they kind of do good justice with. He gets his own episode actually by himself, and he discusses his exes, which I found was really the one negative thing is the Jack Black replacement. I don't know her name, but basically she does not have the same charisma or energy or comedic delivery as Jack Black, which is unfortunate, because you really need that Jack Black to deliver kind of like an asshole type of guy who doesn't care, but like knows his opinions better than everyone else's. So unfortunately they kind of fail in that department. But regardless from that, I feel like overall I did enjoy my time with High Fidelity. I felt like it did have a good modern spin on a lot of the different type of stuff, where it's like looking at your ex's Instagram or something like that. I felt like they did a good transition to a modern audience. Is it necessary? No, but I'm at least happy that there's more High Fidelity out there, because I really love the movie, and if I could get like something that's like 4 hours long, semi same premise, and also really good music choices as well. I think basically I feel like it's a good enough watch if you're interested in, I guess, this type of format. As I mentioned before, I would rather suggest watch the 2000 movie. It's only about like an hour and 45 minutes, and if you like it, I would say go watch the TV show. But I think that the TV show did a relatively good job, surprisingly, for a lot of modern day reboots of things. So yeah, I would suggest watch the movie first. If you like it, go watch the TV show.
I was gonna say, I don't know if you mentioned it, but it is a like a gender swapped version of the original film, correct? So it's about like, rather than being about the main character being a guy and his exes, it's a girl, and Zoe Kravitz's character, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and who played the titular character in the original one?
John Cusack.
Oh, okay, that's really interesting. I hadn't heard of this. You were trying to sell this to me, I think, last week, right?
Yeah, so I was like, the show.
Yeah, and I was like, this sounds boring, but it's supposed to be like a like, is it like a drama, like a dramedy, or like what would you?
That's the thing. It's got comedy elements because you're speaking to the audience, but it is mainly drama. Like the John Cusack version, okay. Like he talks about his exes. One of them is like the first girl he kissed. One of them was like a highly Christian girl. A third one was the Catherine Zeta-Jones know-it-all, talk-it-all type. Fourth one was kind of like a recovery addict type of person, and obviously the fifth one is the more recent breakup that he had, that he thought he was going to kind of marry and things like that. And in this version they kind of do the same, but as mentioned before, they don't give him as much personality. Like one was a stand-up comedy comedian, but they only get like under like 5 to 10 minutes of screen time. As mentioned before, for a TV show, I thought they were going to do like episode by episode, it's going to be the different X. So they don't really explore that too much, and they more explain of like the friends and what they're doing, because the friends have their own kind of side plot of who they like as well. And even then they also have like semi side plot of Zoe Kravitz's brother as well, because the most recent ex she broke up with is obviously the brother's friend. So there's a lot of kind of tension between them.
Awkwardness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think there's a lot of, it just depends on where they focus their attention on. But a lot, yeah, at least they still keep the same general premise and same spirit alive, I think, for the TV show. But as mentioned before, I feel like the personality of the exes were lesser in the TV show, whilst in the movie they stand out as kind of more iconic characters. Because even now, right now, I'm trying to think of all the exes that she was listing. There's like, yeah, there was a guy who turned out to be gay. There was the girl who's kind of like an Instagram influencer, which I did like. And yeah, and it just kind of goes down from there. So it's like, I feel like instead of focusing more on the ex type of side of thing and love, I think it also focuses on what it's like to be old, I guess, and kind of growing up, probably maybe
Right.
alone, because there's a lot of imagery of her, like she looks out the window and she sees like an old lady who's smoking and she's like in her 50s, kind of like, oh shit, like I could be like her in the future. I don't want to be like
Hmm.
her.
Sure.
So that's what they kind of do. It's more like, yeah, growing old and what it's like to have, good friends and family, and what do you do if you alienate them. I think that's
Hmm.
kind of the main premise of the TV show, more than the movie, which is purely based on this guy's particular exes, and he talks to us about like, this person broke up with me because of this, and oh yeah, this person did this. So I found, yeah, it's different. But as I mentioned before, I would suggest the movie over anything, because once again, hour and 45 minutes versus a 4 hour TV show. So if you like the premise, you can continue on with it. So that's why I would suggest to you to watch the movie instead.
Hmm. Yeah, and it seems to be getting pretty good reviews from both critics and I guess fans alike as well. I think it's sitting on like 85s on both ends, whereas the original I think was in its 90s for on Rotten Tomatoes, so to speak. So yeah, I mean, seems like a interesting show if you're into. I guess is it dramedies? I don't know what they're called when
I think
they're
they're
like
dramedies where
romantic
there's like comedy
dramedies.
elements in there, but like there's still some serious moments. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
as I mentioned, like it modernizes, I guess, the romance of like whatever the '90s thing was, because like John Cusack's character has a whole thing where he's like talking about like how to make a good mixtape. And that's a very '90s, early 2000s thing. Whilst like the modern day equivalent, Zoe Kravitz's character is like how to make a good playlist. So they
Hmm.
kind of update it for the modern audience. Because as mentioned before, it's not really just about the love type of stuff and how we interact with people and how we meet people, but as well as music, as mentioned before, where is it ethical to sell a Michael Jackson vinyl, or this type of thing about music, and yeah, and of like music influence, because that's part of the thing as well. I think that's why the name High Fidelity is a play on words, like fidelity meaning you're loyal to your spouse or whoever it be, and high fidelity in a sense of fidelity as in sound, and vinyl is known for getting good sound, which is high fidelity sound. So I find that very interesting. It's a good play on words.
So is the show more about like music than it is about like the romance element of it? Because it seems to be that like at least maybe not the movie itself, but maybe the show, as you said, like it doesn't focus on like a boyfriend per episode or something, but then it does like obviously have that romantic aspect of it. It also kind of focuses on like the music and like I guess like a I don't know like a topic about it, like oh should you buy uh, 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 like an R. Kelly soundtrack or something like that.
Mm.
Would you say like that? It's like one part romance, one part music.
I would say so. Like obviously they're not as in depth as obviously that kind of example, but
Yeah,
there's
yeah, yeah.
yeah, but there's bits of just kind of like, oh yeah, there's one bit where Zoe Kravitz's character, she finds a vinyl collection from this rich person, and it's like this like untouched, really amazing collection, and basically it's the lady wants to sell them for $20, and obviously Zoe Kravitz is like a music file, which is like, no, I can't buy all these things for $20. They're worth like thousands of dollars, so it's kind of like an ethical thing for her. And there's parts where Zoe Kravitz's character kind of semi falls in love with a kind of, what do you call it, like an upcoming music artist, and it's kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
what is it like to kind of date like a music artist where like all these groupies kind of like him as well. So it kind of does that as well. So it's it's a good part music and good part romance. And I feel like that's kind of how it kind of plays out. So yeah, I think overall it has some really great themes and about relationships and friendship, and as well as music as well. So I would highly recommend the movie as well as the TV show, but obviously movie first.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, nice. Anyways, that will be us for this week. Remember, you can always listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, Libsyn, and we stream live on YouTube on our channel Marketing Movies. So like, share, and subscribe. It really helps us going, especially with the YouTube algorithm. So until next time, maybe Henry Cavill is going to be in Locke Key, but he's already in Netflix's Witcher. So until next time, see you guys.
Catch ya.